if you guys see me looking around, like weirdly at the cameras, it's just me checking stuff out, making sure we're good. If
just don't stare at me too much, because your eyes, pierce into my soul when you look at me.
I'll try not to. I mean, it's been we didn't get the opportunity to sit behind the mic the last time you and I saw one another, or the last 2 times. I was just trying to think about when was as much as I've been talking to you guys.
Show.
Okay, so it was you and me and Shot Show. Yep. I saw you 2 guys at TTPOA.
Oh, that was a couple weeks ago too.
But I've we've been talking with one another for months and months now, via internet or whatever, on the phone. But the last time was when you guys were out in my neck of the woods, in the West Coast. You guys were teaching the
Alameda County.
That was the first time I met all of you in person, and then we Jake and I sat behind the mic and talked a little bit, but
you didn't care about the rest of us.
But here we are. Now we're on. Now
we're just doing grunt work. Waiting for Jake to show up to the class.
To be honest, I didn't even know Heppner was going to be there, and I was probably in that room 20 minutes before I realized who I was sitting 3 seats down.
Did you ever regret that you chose Jake over me?
For a second, I was like, well, if I'd known better, I would have planned for more time. So we had to come back through. We had to come back through. I snagged you at SHOT Show for a minute. Yeah. We were super busy.
Yeah, that was perfect.
But it's really good to be here with you guys. And we're here in Heppner's neck of the woods, way out here in Kansas at your spot. So for those of you watching, you can see we're in the barn, the infamous barn.
We're in the barn gym. Yeah, 50 by 70, functioning CrossFit affiliate, but doesn't have a CrossFit title behind it.
This place is dope.
Yeah.
Glad you clarified that.
Yeah.
I was going to call you in.
I don't want to get a bill.
Yeah, I was going to call you in, but I guess I can't now.
Yeah.
The famous barn.
It is. It's good to be here, man. This place is cooler in person. Hep, you just got back from competing.
I was in the great state of Idaho. I competed out there at my first tactical games event for the season. I always wait quite a bit of time. And so I was out in Idaho competing against, guys we all know, Aaron Clark from Tier 1, because you were just actually current events, they all tie in together. I was hanging out competing with Aaron, and you were actually out at Defender Ranch with him a couple days before.
The Tier 1 guys, yep. That exact week, actually.
It was. And you were, how far away is it? Did he live from Defender Ranch?
He lived from?
Yeah,
a couple hours.
So we were probably within 4 hours of each other.
Yeah.
Small world. How'd it go? I heard it went well for you.
Won it. First one of the year. Took a W. I have another one coming up in 2 weeks, but I'm probably going to turn it down and go to CrossFit semifinals, watch some of the athletes compete. Nice. But then I'll do a few more this season. I don't like to tell people where I'm going. I just like to show up. I don't want to scare people away, you know? Surprise!
What was the big takeaway from this last competition for you?
Big takeaway, after action report perspective, and we'll probably work out this weekend, is it's still for me, it is going to be shooting only stages are difficult. You give me fitness and shooting. It's very simplistic shooting in our sport, of course, but you give me fitness and shooting and game on, brother. I can do that all day long. But as soon as it's hey, you're only going to do shooting, I'm always going to do a struggle. So I pretty much took first or second on every event except for took a fifth.
Oh, outstanding. I mean, that's pretty good record.
I took a fifth on that work. That's not good.
No. I mean, but you were able to balance that against the first or second.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the positive here. Come on,
for sure. But
so that glass is half full.
Yeah. But it went well. So
good.
Good to be back.
And what was going on up in Tier 1? What were you doing up there?
Yeah, so I went out there with Tier 1 guys, Jared and Aaron. We did some shooting. God, man, that Defender Ranch is sick.
Yeah. The turf.
Oh, my gosh. One of the nicest ranges that I've ever been to. The bays were amazing, but then they had a really cool known distance precision ranges and then unknown all through the canyon wall. It was really cool.
So were you shooting pistol and carbine?
Yep. We shot pistol, carbine, and the precision rifles, I would say, but it was a gas gun.
Nice.
So
how badly did Jared beat you?
Yeah, that's what I want to know.
Yeah, exactly.
Dude, Jared is an amazing shooter. He is an amazing shooter. Yeah. He catches up with his shooting to his movement, but he's not a bad mover.
Yeah.
He's a lot taller than what I realized. He's actually probably closer to y'all's heights.
It's a requirement to be on that team to be really tall.
Yeah, seriously, him and Aaron both. Yeah, I felt like a midget compared. I felt like a midget compared to Aaron and Jared. But no, great shooters, super good dudes, super articulate. I really enjoyed shooting with both of them. They're not absolute. You have to do this. I see a lot in the community in terms of shooting. Very, very knowledgeable. We got after it. We competed. I definitely had to throw in a lot of movement so I could just even be in the ballpark and so we could actually compete. But no, great dudes. We had a good time. I think that they do a lot of static shooting. They ran our T-drill. They set some really good times. I think Jared actually might have the fastest time. And so, yeah, it was go out there, kind of cross-train together. and just honestly have fun. And then we'll have our IEP crew will go back out there in August and just do some collaboration on content. They make really good holsters, and it was just one of those things, like just to go out and really, I think, train.
Yeah.
Jared, I think, enjoys having. I'm not saying I fit in this category, but I think he enjoys bringing in experts in specific areas to train and see, like, hey, it's always good to learn new things, and I think he enjoys competing. And so,
Right.
we went out and we had a good time.
Yeah, it's good.
So-
I mean, it's out there in the middle of Idaho, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it's
yeah.
I don't know how many visitors they actually get out there very often, but
Yeah, I think he keeps it pretty exclusive. Gosh, it was an amazing facility.
I can appreciate that.
I mean, it was beautiful. Yeah, it was an awesome experience. So look forward to getting back out there. But yeah, it was a good time.
Cool. While all that was going on, I know I was chatting back and forth with Aaron a little bit. He was recently at the strength and conditioning conference down in Dallas.
Yep. I went to the CSCCA National Conference for 3 days a couple weeks ago. So learned a lot from very experienced strength coaches. Got tidbits of information, tried to pull as much as I could, see how I can use it for what we do here. It was good catching up with some old mentors, old coaching buddies, just seeing how life's been going with them.
Cool. I'm just going to adjust the sound. I know what's going on. You guys were all talking super loud when we were setting up, and now everybody's quieted down a little bit.
Oh, I can fix that.
Yeah, I was going to say, Hep's like,
I'm not adjusting.
don't throw me with a good time.
I'm not adjusting Heps at all. No, we're not doing that. Want to talk about why we're here? While we all finally made it back together again?
Yeah, let's do it.
band is getting back
The band's getting back together.
Y'all didn't come to Kansas for good Mexican food, so
Dude, that is no lie. That ain't no lie.
Can confirm.
you can't confirm.
Can confirm.
Last night, my wife made Mexican food for Scott.
That was great.
Scott's like, that was great lunch. We call that Mexican food, I guess. I think what we've done a really good job of up to this point is being experts in the field, specifically for what we're putting out, the information with human performance and movement. And we're growing that team. I think bringing in more experts that can enhance what we're currently doing. And we all have different areas of expertise. And so I think, how it all came together has, I think, been pretty wild to kind of see.
I'll tell my version of how I met Jake, and then I wouldn't mind. I actually don't know yours.
Yeah,
at all,
that's an
Scott.
easy one. Yeah,
Okay,
it's
so-
super exciting.
For me,
I was going to say, I'm curious to hear that.
there I was.
I want to hear this story because I have mine
I'm
too.
going to make fun of Jake so bad. So for me, I started, there was a company that wanted to work with me. Company was called 10,000, and Jake represented their tactical. He was leading the tactical department, I believe, if I'm correct.
Yep.
And we had gotten a phone call, and I remember the first thing I'm just going to say the first thing that comes to my mind when I get on calls with people, and it was, he's like, I got these shorts. They're tactical shorts, like you can wear them for whatever you're competing in. And I was like, they don't have belt loops. They're not tactical. I just completely threw it out
No,
there.
it was not a phone call. It was messages. It was messages first.
Very direct.
And that is exactly what it was. It was like, hey, you want to try out these tactical shorts? You're like, do they have belt loops? And I was like, nope. You're like, well, they're not tactical. They have belt loops. I was like, who the hell is this guy?
He's a sleeper.
I was like,
He's
who
a
is
CrossFit
this?
guy. I spent a lot of time in the military. God. So we got to know each other. He was pretty much my athlete control for whatever reason. I pretty much work with him, and we get on calls in the beginning and talk about business, stuff working with 10,000.
Yeah.
And then that slowly started turning into what does he do? What do I do? We got to know each other. And then we would just jump on calls to talk business stuff. And then at some point it kind of pivoted over into, he would talk about his company, IEP. And there was one in Oklahoma, which is 3.5 hours south of us. Where was that?
What?
Tulsa.
Tulsa. Thank you. Tulsa. It was IEP event.
Okay, gotcha.
TPL. Yes, TPLs.
Yeah, thank you. And so it was a TPL event down in Tulsa, which is 3.5 hours south of me. And he was like, hey, man, you should come out and just see what it's about because we've talked about it. So, and it was easy for me to drive there, of course. So I drove down there and I knew some already guys who were in the company, Sal Hernandez being one of them. And got to know them, got to kind of figure out what they were doing and kind of fell in love with the idea, which we'll get into more, of course, of bringing people back to being athletes, whether they are law enforcement or military, and hearkening back to the days of doing agility and doing change of direction in high school and bringing that back to them and training like athletes again was kind of my initial reaction when I got involved. And so I had, from there on out, kept teaching at a couple different events before you. I represented the shooting expert. Kidding. I represented the fitness kind of expert because of my background in CrossFit for many, many years. And was awesome because I got to spend time and actually learned a lot of movement stuff from the team. In the fitness stuff I would teach, but when it came time to shooting and movement, I was literally now an attendee.
Yeah.
And got to learn a lot and really thoroughly just enjoyed that. Got involved doing more and more, taught a TTPOA with you guys a couple times, or once I should say. And we just had more business conversations over and over and over, and kind of realized like, obviously Aaron represents like the perfect mixture of like, I don't have a degree in fitness, but I've done enough of the experience side of things. And so we kind of realized that there was enough of a gap that could be filled in the company that I represented. And so we kind of got into discussions of, okay, now, so let's talk about you just, instead of showing up and just teaching now, how do we get you involved in the actual business?
Right. When I originally entered into the space, what I noticed was there was this lack of connection between how people moved on the range when they were asked to move versus what was happening and what they were counting as, let's just say, good or good enough, standing in front of paper at 5, 7, maybe 10 yards or whatever. And I was like, okay, this is cool, but what happens when things get a little bit more dynamic? And it was really interesting to see, those people that were very good in those static positions, everything kind of fall apart when they started moving. And a lot of it was they just weren't good movers. And a lot of it was they weren't in very good physical condition either. And you don't have to be that way in order to be a good shooter. I understand that. But then I'm a nerd that way. I kind of just look at people's almost 30 years in the fitness business, and specifically like training people and individuals, from athletes to all the way to like general population. That's just where my head is all day long. And I was like, oh, well, maybe I could help here. Right. So I started to kind of look at who else is who's providing the same types of things that I do outside of shooting, and how's that being provided to maybe people that I was in classes with, like law enforcement or whatever else. Because in my head, I was like, that's where the pinnacle should be. Sure. Right. That's where the best instruction should be happening for the people that make a living behind the gun. Right. And certainly I was in classes with people that had done that for a long time, or maybe still do that, guys from the military or whatever else. And some of them were very good. And I could see this guy's an athletic dude, but where is he getting his programming from? Like how did he learn? Where did he learn from? And there were other guys, again, I was connecting with that were kind of recognizing the gaps. And I was quickly learning like that a lot of that training doesn't really exist for these guys. Right. And that meaning like the professional or whatever. And I was like, I thought that was interesting. But I got a call from a guy, his name's Tony Ryan. He was at TTPOA. Yep. I've had Tony on the show before. He's a neuroscience dude, and he's a big shooter, and he likes to nerd out. And he'd come from one of your classes and met you there, and he's like, dude, TTPOA. He knew what I was looking for in terms of conversation.
Is this eyeball guy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hep is terrible in names. Yeah, actually, but yeah. The
eyeball guy. Yeah. Okay, he was cool.
So Tony's an awesome dude.
Tony's a very, very smart human performance guy, but he spends a lot of time with in neuroscience, particularly like the vestibular system and things like that. So anyway, he's like, dude, you gotta, if you haven't met, and at that point I'd kind of seen in Extremis Performance pop up. I'd seen Jake pop up a few times, so I kind of knew about him. And he said, dude, let me connect you. He connected me. And we got on a phone call. I think that phone call went almost 3 hours.
Yeah, it was a long call.
It was a long call. And it was like, he was finishing my sentences and I was kind of finishing some of his. And I was like, man, I don't know where this goes from here. I just know I want these conversations to continue. And maybe there's an opportunity in the future to work together in some way. And, I think what people probably learn is like over time that's evolved, and that's where we're here today. Right. It has totally evolved, and I've been able to, like, every time it's such a valuable experience for me. So I went and I saw all you guys teaching in Alameda very shortly thereafter. I had you on the show. We talked through some stuff. I got to see in application what we had talked about, and I was like, where else is this happening? And I quickly found it isn't. Yeah. I mean, there's great people out there doing great stuff. There's a lot of guys I know that are working with people that are getting ready for selection processes, or with like tactical games athletes or CrossFitters or whatever. But nobody was really bridging the gap between what's happening maybe in application in like a dynamic shooting environment versus the human performance. And they are very different things, but they obviously come together at some point. And I think you've done, what you guys have been doing at IEP is figuring out a way to deliver that information in a way people can understand it, but more importantly, go practice and apply it. Yeah. So I was like, if there's a way I can be on board with that, I'm all in. Yeah. So
it really has. It's just been such a wild journey of that growth. And I think the transition, it feels weird to almost say of how I do think we filled a very big gap. I think there's a lot of people doing good things. Mm-hmm. We filled this gap of really taking it from the expertise, human performance with the movement as it applies to shooting, And I do think that we're leading the charge on it. And bringing in extra, I will now hand it off to you who has led the charge on a lot of that expertise, though. Not your first rodeo.
Yeah, this is a great opportunity to kind of like introduce Aaron to the world.
Yeah,
I think he was saying like
first time in front of a camera.
I was lighting everything up, like switching everything.
What do I do with my hands?
Exactly. So she's like, "This is my first time on camera." I'm like, "Are you serious? Really? Why?"
Yeah.
He's like, "I don't know. I don't even know the answer to that." But I was like, "This is gonna be an awesome opportunity to kind of put Aaron out there and put him in front of everybody because all the fitness and human performance stuff that you see sort of programmed. If you don't know about it, we'll talk about it. But behind the scenes really is coming from you and your expertise. I know a little bit about your background. Maybe you can kind of talk a little bit about that, give people some perspective, but then also how this connection happened.
Yeah, so I went and got my bachelor's degree from Southeastern Oklahoma State up in Durant, Oklahoma, or Durant for the actual Texans. So I went there, went to attempt to play football. Walked on for a year, played quarterback. There was too many quarterbacks. I saw that I was not going to play. So I had an understanding of the next step for me was to coach. I went in already wanting to be a science teacher and football coach. And so went to the head coach, was like, hey, is there an opportunity for me to help out? So I became an undergrad assistant. Did that for a year and then transitioned to wanting to help out with strength and conditioning too. Found out that I had a very big passion for it. I took one nutrition class and not to brag, I aced every single test and was like, maybe there's something here. Just felt God calling me to that. So I started doing strength and conditioning and football. 2 years in, I think I met Jake through my roommate at the time. His now wife is Jake's sister. So
yeah. He is my brother-in-law.
Jake's brother-in-law.
Yeah, I was like, that's out of order. Yeah. that was, you worded that very wrongly. Yeah,
I did.
Sorry. Yes, his roommate was my brother-in-law, or is now my brother-in-law.
Yeah. So had that connection. We just met. Nothing crazy. I knew he went through selection, Q course, going to be Green Beret and all that stuff. My brother at the time was wanting to go into NSW. And so I went up and kind of picked his brain a little bit of like, hey, you've done this high level performance-wise. Any tips for me helping my younger brother out with that? So that's kind of how the connection started. And then after I coached for 4 years at Southeastern, went to Oklahoma State to get my master's, GA'd there with the football strength program. A couple of years into that, he called me and was like, hey, is there any possibility that you'd want to come help out? I just started a company, IEP. I said, no. I wanted to try to see how far I can.
Boy.
Right.
Boy, somehow. Power play.
Yeah.
It was a lot nicer than that.
Playing hard to get.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah.
I wanted to see how long I can go in college.
Yeah.
That was my passion. I spent a lot of time, a lot of hours, a lot of early mornings investing that time. I didn't want to just bail on it because to me, myself, I felt like I would be a failure in that sense. And so kept going with it, did my 3 years at Oklahoma State and then went for a fellowship at Memphis during 2020. And then once COVID hit and all that happened,
things changed.
Things changed. My view of college sports with the NIL deals going through, how they handled COVID, a lot of other political kind of things going on.
I feel all that. Yeah,
it was a lot to deal with, and I didn't see me being happy and enjoying the work further down the road as I got, because pretty much every strength coach I've ever worked for and worked with, not a super happy person overall.
They're moving around a lot. Yeah, the job is always on the line.
Exactly.
They're stressed.
So you came groveling back to Jake, asked for that job again. Is that what I'm
Actually, he came groveling back
again?
to me.
A second time?
Yeah, he had a second time.
Wow,
So,
I love how you are framing this. But yeah, sure, keep going.
So,
persistent.
Why not?
I didn't get recruited in college. I walked on in college, so I felt recruited here. I felt real valuable.
Oh my gosh.
I gotcha.
So yeah, he called me. I ended up actually going home for a month once COVID hit because we just shut down the whole campus.
Yeah.
Essentially weren't doing anything. And so I went to his house, met with him, and he said, hey, do you want to come help out with programming? They got in a contract with Secret Service at that time. And so I was like, yeah, let's do this. Let's see how it goes. So I did that for my last year of coaching college. So all of 2020, I also coached and was working on the programming with him.
Gotcha.
As the year went on, I was like, man, I really like this stuff. Like I feel a lot more called to help out in law enforcement. So I left college, went to a private sector facility just to kind of be able to pay bills, and was also working with him at the time.
This is getting going, yeah.
Yeah, and it just kept growing and growing and growing until we're at the point now where I've been doing this for about 4 or 5 years now.
This is, so I just want to make note of something because because you were listening to my story last night about COVID and how challenged I was as a business owner during that time. Specific to like what we're talking about now and like how people came together, and then specifically how this business is kind of evolved, but also like the shooting community, shooting sports, the acknowledgement that there's stuff there to do and that there's value in it. Without COVID, I don't know that we'd be here, in the same spot that we're at. Like, I hate it. I didn't need to learn those lessons that way or have it evolve that way. But I'll tell you, like, it's interesting when you just brought that up, because I knew a little bit about that, but I didn't know the whole story and how that. If that hadn't happened, who knows? Maybe it'd still be in the college thing, traveling around the country, working with volleyball.
You can only handle so many nose tests.
Yeah, yeah.
And testing negative.
You're talking about the COVID test.
Oh yeah, I got tested like 48 times.
Brutal.
Throughout the entire fall, it was rough.
So that brings us all the way back to like now we're all sitting in the same room together. You're just kind of talking about what IEP has done. I think you kind of hit it. Like to maybe overview it for people that don't know, this has been human performance meets shooting for several years now, and there's been a really large emphasis. And again, this is an important part of introducing Aaron today. I think there's been such an emphasis on the shooting part, because I think that's where people are seeing a lot of Jake, who's been obviously the face behind the company. But at the same time, there's been this development of the human performance side on the back end. And so the other things that IEP does outside of these shooting courses is what is happening on that end. So I want to talk about that a little bit.
See, and it's funny even to hear you say that. Sorry to cut you off, because like that's really where our beginning was, right?
That's what I'm saying.
Like I was going through getting my doctorate. It was all human performance out the gate. Like when I first contracted with Secret Service, some of these other federal agencies we worked with were all human performance focused. It wasn't until we started working with some of these and identifying this kind of like gap that wasn't happening. I'm bringing another expert that's like, hey, he knows what he's doing there. Funny Aaron's story. Homie, we go up there with Secret Service. I'm talking, this dude was so nervous. I was like, bro, did you do something illegal? Because you're making me a little bit concerned right now. He was so scared. And I was like, bro, just chill, man.
That's awesome.
Like, and then as soon as we stepped in the gym, it was like this whole other personality. It was like, boom, this is my place. And it was funny because even the agents were like, dude, is your guy okay? I'm like, I think he's all right. Honestly, I don't know. We're about to find out. But dude, when they stepped in, they're like, damn, all right, this guy's here. Yeah. But, and so it's funny to, because I think, again, we wanted to hyper focus on that expertise. Like we know the tactical world, right? And so like things like we had this expert strength and conditioning coach, knows his stuff, put him through a basic SWAT school. So he like understands, right? We really tried to hang our hat, but it was all built around that human performance. It just so happens, even though in the last 7 years we've been doing that, all the shooting, all of a sudden, people are like, oh.
It's getting a lot of attention.
Now we're, whereas like, we're not doing anything different. It's been the same the whole time, right?
Yeah, but the thing that people are taking away is what they're seeing in terms of like the movement or the dynamic piece.
Sure.
I mean, regardless of showing hits on a target, it's like people are recognizing like that dude moves different. Aaron is moving different. Jake is moving different than I see most people moving. And they're starting to put the pieces together like that. That is important.
Sure.
Like and more specifically for those that are more apt to be in those situations. And that's probably a larger conversation, from the patrol cop to the guy that's on a team, the team cop or a special, an agency that has a special team that may be in a more, say, dynamic or volatile sort of environment. But the bottom line is people are putting the connection together. And it's not just cops, it's or agencies from like a mill or federal or, again, getting down to like the municipal areas. You're seeing like competition shooters are recognizing like, if I could do that, like I would shave seconds off of my stages in USPSA or whatever.
I mean, we're having big conversations. We're having GMs call us and be like, hey,
we're seeing
you break this down. I was going to point at Heppner and say, just the random citizen. He doesn't carry a gun normally. So not him, everyone else who can still carry.
Streets now.
Hey, you know what? Seems like she probably carry a gun. But like, right, it could be anybody because it is so important, right? Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're not cutting me off at all. I think that the dialogue basically is that it was human performance and it still is. It hasn't gone anywhere. It's just I think people know IEP more now currently because some of those GM shooters are some big names out there. You don't have to look deep into the Instagram feed or onto YouTube or whatever to kind of see like the types of people that you've been working with. And I don't want to say like it's an endorsement, but in a way it's like, hey, this is this is an endorsement that we're here when we're working together. Like, I wouldn't have you out here because I'm not wasting my time, and I'm not going to waste anybody else's time. So
it's going in the right direction. And it's not like we're teaching them all these, right?
Right. It's sharing
We're
ideas.
good at movement, though, right? And that's where it is. It turns into, a lot of them turn into whiteboard sessions. It's been a lot of fun, like Mark Smith and some of these guys that we're shooting with.
Right.
It's brainstorming. How do we take our expertise and enhance what you're doing?
Yeah, and I think the smart thing about those people is they're recognizing this is beyond USPSA, or it's beyond the gunfight that might happen, for whoever. It's there's so many moving pieces to this, and they're recognizing like these guys are articulating it in a way that it hasn't been articulated yet. And we can see now that this could be trained, and they're giving us like resources and instruction on maybe how to train it so I can get better as the average citizen or even the cop. So, I think that's interesting. From a business perspective, you kind of talked about who you're working with and how that's kind of evolved and, who we might see with. But like, what's the approach overall? Like, if you had like a philosophy or a framework that you're working within, how has that been approached, I guess is the right
word. Give us like an elevator pitch.
Fly by the seat of the pants. I don't have a great one. Like, it's evolved so much, right? Like, I know you hate this specifically, but
like, give it to me.
But it's one of those ones where, like, out the gate, like, I do not feel like there was a solid representation when we started this, right? There were MilSoft units that had HPO, human performance optimization programs, that I do believe in, and I think they're great, but I felt like there was a gap there that I specifically saw early in my career, where I was like, we're in the gym, we're not going out to drop zones, we're not going to rucking, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So when we started doing this, we were very fortunate with some of the units we had that allowed us to go to the shoot house. We allowed to see demos and all these, and live ops, whatever it was. And so I think it just started evolving. It was one of the units we were working with. We said, we just came from the shoot house where y'all are running around. We're on the flat range yard standing here. Is this how it normally is? Like, yeah. Like, how would you do it different? I was like, right? Like, I don't know. Like, I think I would try this, and like, we'll show up tomorrow with a plan. And I was like, oh, crap, And it's one of those things where then it's like, well, can you do it? You're like, I should have thought this through a little bit more. But it was a challenge, right? Like, that is how we started training, getting more efficient or proficient in shooting. So I think it's hard, right? Because I don't feel like I didn't feel like early on there was a solid roadmap. Very much felt like a trailblazer trying to figure it out. So the elevator pitch here. I know
this is a really long elevator.
I know.
We're going to the top of the Eiffel Tower right now.
I think that I want to bring in experts that we are in the human performance space and enhancing whoever you are in the shooting community. Civilian, competition, military, law enforcement, whoever it is, right? I also think providing that expertise from a shooting platform, but also human performance. I think this one over here gets really muddy.
The human performance part?
The human performance part in the community. There's a lot of blind leading the blind in terms of, I have this experience as a cop or as a military or as a whatever.
Yeah.
But maybe you don't have the education. You don't truly know what you're doing, the human performance side.
Or you just find the end of that, the end of that knowledge fairly quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're coming from an experiential piece, but the depth of knowledge.
Yeah, it's not malicious. I'm not saying it's malicious. I'm just saying just don't know any better. And same, there's people that have that expertise that I'm not saying Aaron learned everything from SWAT school, but he at least gained a little bit more knowledge in the regular strength coach who's never
for them is
that who's never done it, right? And so I think that it goes both ways. But sorry, I don't have a 30-second elevator pitch for you.
I think this is awesome. This is actually getting so.
You said organic. I'm giving you organic, bro.
It's organic,
tell
bro.
me.
That's good.
I'm glad it's getting pulled out this way because that's how I've seen it happen. But if I had to give you, if I had to,
here we go.
What's your elevator pitch?
What I would say is, coming off of what you said there about like we're kind of reaching out to everybody. Basically, what we're talking how to make people better at moving around with firearms, whether they're making a living with a gun, they're using it for sport, they're using it for their own personal protection or whatever. And we're making sure that they understand how to train that outside of just going to the range every day. Because what you see, on the range didn't happen just on the range. There are things that can be done that, again, when people are watching you on Instagram, they're seeing you guys move. And that's not just something you go to the range and do. Right. There's a method, there's a framework for getting this done. So I mean,
okay, my turn.
Yeah, your turn.
Okay. You know what? I like this. All right. I hope you're thinking it's coming to you next.
I got 3 words. I got 3 words for mine. So go ahead.
Oh, Can you
be an athlete.
Okay, that's 3 words too.
Mine essentially is be an athlete. Like I think what we do and why I'm here is, you guys kind of stole my motto, but I remember a couple of years ago, you guys always had a motto for IEP, and I said, well, it's come down to you have to be trained smart. Mm-hmm. You guys took it and didn't even give me credit. But anyways, like what we're trying to get people to understand is, I want you to hearken back to when you were an athlete, training as an athlete. We're gonna do the same thing. And when I want to become better in junior high football, I train like a junior high football player. Right. And now we're doing the same thing. So you want to become better at your job, which we'll get into the SPP versus GPP conversation. But like when we want to get better at your job, I need you to be an athlete in that position. And we're hearkening back to that and teaching people to approach that better. Train smarter.
Yeah. Train smarter.
Yeah.
I love that. It's the whole, are you just working out, or are you, or are you training?
Are you training?
Yeah.
Are you training?
Fitness versus performance is a whole other conversation we can have.
Oh,
that's not 3. Yeah.
No.
I think I have a question. I'll follow up a question then after you define what IEP is.
My version, 3 words.
3 words.
Athletic, performance, applied.
It's not even a sentence.
He didn't say it was.
I said 3 words.
That's good. That's good.
Okay, that is awesome. So athletic, performance, applied.
That's right.
So it's spot on. That's coming from, again, this is the dude who's putting the programming together on the back end. Yeah. So then what we got to do is define like what's athletic. So more specifically, let's get to the root of that and like, what is an athlete, and define what that is. I'm going to throw it back to you, Aaron, because that was awesome.
He's only got 3 words.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have a big vocabulary. My thought of an athlete, overall arcing athlete, is just someone who can learn skills quickly and then apply them.
Physically.
Okay.
All right.
Right. This is just completely in the human performance space. Somebody who can take those learn skills quickly and then apply them relatively to the standard that they learned them.
Okay. So there's a couple things that popped out there. One, learn skills that you can apply, and that there's a standard there somehow, like it can be measured. And if it can be measured, then it can be, for me, it can also be managed, and improved. Like I can document this, collect data. And if I truly understand human performance, of human physiology and whatever else, I can easily, if I know what I'm doing, take that data and based on the individual and the task or the skills that we're trying to give them, and we can put it together in programming.
Which I think that is another huge one for me right there that is not done. The inability to identify skills and objectively measure them.
Yeah. So I'm not even going to ask. I'm not even going to ask Heppner, because I know he's going to. I don't
know what you're going to ask, but
I think you already handled it in your first explanation. Let's talk about that. So what are the things that you kind of see out there that are misapplied, or just, I'm not going to say done wrong. I'm just going to say it could be done way better.
I think in the tactical community, there is a lot of opinions, a lot of from experience, right, wrong, or indifferent, right? And frankly, I think a lot of people struggle when, are we referencing human performance programs? Yeah. In programs, I see a lot of, as we commonly talk on, it's not what Aaron likes, it's not what Jake likes, not what he's good at or I'm good at. It's what is the job? Identify the skills needed to be successful at that job. In our courses, even when we teach the shooting side, we'll run a drill and we'll say, hey, what skills within that drill do you need to have to be successful at that drill, right? And I think that programs in the community, and in my opinion, one of the things that's missed is it's like, Scott likes to lift. So it's going to be a lifting program. And his resume said this in the military special operations and law enforcement special for this many years. People are like, okay, yeah, let's do. It's like,
there's an assumption
like,
made that
that's not the case. It's just an opinion versus things like the NSCA, their TSAC, they put out research. We have gone and researched lots of teams, tested lots of teams. We have done research, but
there's a difference.
It is objective, right? We go and look at our programs objectively. Is it being successful? Injury mitigation, performance, right? Like these different variables we're trying to isolate, look at, and make it objective. And I think that, I'm not saying it's not done at all. I have not seen it done where I'm like, amazing.
Okay, so I have another question for Aaron based on that. So you was just mentioning the testing that's happened. And this was one of the things that impressed me the most when I did get with you guys in person the first time. because I watched it happen and I was part of that survey. Like I was just kind of going through the questions, and I got an opportunity to sit down with you guys and ask specific questions about what the data was being, what data was being fed back. So it's one thing is giving it, but it's also interpolating and then understanding and kind of aggregating, like, where are people coming from? What were some of the things that like really popped off the page for you, Aaron? As I know there were some for me, but that popped off the pages for you to be like, wow, this is contradictory. Like, and this is, maybe it was part of like, I knew it and nobody's ever been able to show it. We're seeing it right now. Or, man, that super surprised me. I had no idea.
So when I first got in, I was coming in from an outsider's perspective. And so the train like you fight mentality was real big. And so I was going in initially programming of like, hey, I got to make these things hard. All these workouts hard and taxing, because that's what these guys need, because they never know what they're going to experience out in the field. So why not simulate the stress in the gym and make it easily transferable to what they train on the range and all that stuff. When we got started building the course, we took a survey, and the TSAC or NSCA TSAC annual report had put out, it's been updated since, but in 2015, they put out a bunch of skills that are going to be used regularly in law enforcement. And the number one most trained one, or in SWAT, sorry. The number one most trained one was agility, which threw me off because I was thinking you need to be strong and you need to be really, really fit. And fitness.
How are you defining that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which,
well, and the other thing, let me go into that research just real quick. I think it's Jay Dawes out of Oklahoma State, but essentially they isolate all the most commonly used skills. Skills maybe is the wrong word.
Domains, I think.
Yeah. It was like crawling, jumping over a fence, chasing a suspect, things like that, right?
Yes, yeah.
From that, what performance metrics must you have to be successful at whatever it is, right? So chasing a suspect, speed, agility, capacity, right? What out of all of those used, agility was used the most. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so that was
10 out of 12 of the skills they surveyed were agility used predominantly. So, so this will be a little connection to Heppner. I got into CrossFit in 2015, and I really threw myself into it. This was as I was getting into strength and conditioning. I also wanted to work out. It actually happened because I watched one of those videos that Froning did, and he was a GA at Tennessee Tech.
Okay.
Yep. And so I was like, oh, that's a possibility. And I really enjoyed working out. I like the training and the process, chasing to be better. And so saw that was a possibility. And that's what got me to go to the strength coach at Southeastern and like, hey, can I get in on this? Yeah. And so did CrossFit for a few years. It's not good. I'm 6'3".
Yeah.
It's not built for me.
Limited.
Very, very limited, except for wall balls and rowing. Any wall ball and rowing, I'm good. So I threw myself into that. And, you have all the workouts like Fight Gone Bad and
I see where you're going with this.
Castro came out with he had a video of him working out and talking about the CrossFit Games in general. And he said, this is the way Navy SEALs should train. And so that's where my mindset was with like tactical athlete, tactical training, all of that. CrossFit.
I think most people's heads would probably think that's probably the right place to go.
Right. So survey.
I agree.
Do we need him on this? So the survey really opened up my eyes to exactly what those guys really need and how it needs to apply it. And a lot of it was just coming back to being an athlete. Mm-hmm. They need to be able to sprint. They need to be able to change direction. They need to have power and able to decelerate on the dime versus, sure, you can have a high engine, but if you can't move, that engine does nothing for you.
Yeah, so that's the things that I was very surprised by too. Not that my head was in you got to do CrossFit or you have to train a plate carrier every day or that kind of thing, but more of the disconnect that and again you identified it as being SWAT because this was the major population that you were training, right? Whether it was like a federal SWAT team or a municipal SWAT team. So just to be clear, but the disconnect between what they said they needed, what the research says they're probably going to need, what they identified as their missing pieces or what they think they need, and then what they were actually training in their own training programs. Right. There's a lot of other questions like, where are you getting your training from? Are you programming for yourself? That stuff. But there was a massive disconnect because while they say I probably need agility, where was that happening in terms of a ranking with regard to prioritization in their own workout program? While they said it was the most important thing they need, it was the last thing they were training, if training at all.
Right. Yeah. The top three were what they said they needed was strength, stability and balance, and then agility, versus stability was number 7 ranked out of 9, and then agility was number 8. So there's a massive disconnect.
Inverse.
I'm like, you understand that you need this, but you're not doing it. And so we made the connection of maybe there's just a lack of understanding of how to train it.
I was just about to
say, what's the gap?
That is what I was just about to say. I really don't think it's a situation of like, oh, ignorance. Like, you know, I'm saying it, but I'm not doing it. I feel like as we've gotten further into this, it's just not understood of like, how do I train this though? And as we've trained more and more units, I think it's more of a lack of understanding or knowledge on that, which again, right? Like I'm totally okay with that answer. We had to go to a lot of school to have a confidence to be able to train that, right? That's not their job. Yeah. So I'm totally okay with that answer. And so I think a lot of it is education.
And just looking at like how athletes train themselves and Jacob, you're around them all the time, right? And the things that you do, and you have been for years and years and years. I think there's some common mistakes. I think you can kind of categorize the mistakes and also kind of by the people or maybe even the type of athlete or the type of commitment somebody has to something, like of what they make. But just if you took the whole law enforcement side of this thing out, which we were just talking about over here, and you just looked at athletes in general, what is it the same? Is it different in terms of what they're training versus what they maybe should be training and how they're prioritizing things?
Yeah, but I think that conversation comes down to what you're training for. They're talking from a law. I know you said take law enforcement out of it, but like as an athlete, you're training for something. I don't, when people come work out my barn, it's always like, what are you training for? I always want to ask that. Is it a 5K? Great. Is it to pick up my kid better? Great. When I was training, we didn't test a lot of agility. So when I hadn't done agility since like college football. And so when I had went to a course in Tulsa, right? Tulsa.
Yep.
Like I'd never done an agility drill in a long time, let alone stick a gun in my hand. I looked like a dork.
You did. You did look like...
Never in agreement.
But honestly, but it was funny. Yeah, you got...
For one of the world's greatest athletes, it's an interesting thing to say by definition of what like CrossFit does.
Yeah.
And that's where you would spend your time.
Because you look at it, like when you look at a sport, because I come from a sport background. So when I look at a sport, I say to myself, if I want to win this sport or become better compared to last year, or whatever the case may be, where are my improvements lie at? Not in my sport, agility was not important. Like we don't test agility. If we do, it's maybe 100-point event, maybe every other year out of 15. So like, cool. I'm not going to spend my time wasting my time on agility. Like I'm going to spend my time on the areas I can gain the most points at.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So then when I came here,
you
it was
understood
like,
that.
Yeah. Yes. So when I came here and realized, oh, well, I suck at agility, Jake. That's an area for me to improve that.
Yeah. So again, going back, and this goes back to what where Aaron was going with the whole CrossFit thing. People are gravitating towards CrossFit, but in CrossFit, there is no need for agility. It's very little.
Very little.
Right? So if you're using that as predominantly as your mode of exercise and exercise programming to be a better athlete as a law enforcement officer, right, or in the military, there's transference, there's crossover there, but you're still leaving a lot on the table. There are still things that are missing. And so what are you going to come out of there with that is very valuable and does transfer over, because there's still a huge amount of value in this, right? And train that way. What are you bringing to the table in terms of like how an athlete should train, and what are the basic things they need to have? You mentioned a couple of them, but I come back to like the basics. Like first off, strength matters. Sure. You have to have a good level of strength, and there needs to be a solid balance of that against some other things. So now that you're this big, strong athlete, like, can you express that strength, right, through, power and speed? And then once you can express that strength, can you then maintain that expression for a duration of time? So whether that's the 40-yard sprint from the car to the suspect in wrestling match, that ends very quickly, or maybe that turns into a longer foot chase, which turns into a longer wrestling match, which then turns into, maybe a barricaded suspect where you're doing different things or whatever else. So I kind of look at it and go, it's kind of rooted in becoming an athlete is rooted in a lot of things. How do we define what that is? Well, I think it goes back to it depends. Yep. It goes back to it depends.
Absolutely.
But there are some fundamental foundational things that I think every athlete, that has to move and compete at something that has an offense and a defense, to it at some level, or is on a clock, and you're being measured by performance in that sense, not subjectively with regard to like a score like being judged, so forth. It's either you did or you didn't. You either passed or you failed. You succeeded or you didn't. You're ranked, based on a win or a loss or something like that. I think that's really what we're talking about with athleticism and being an athlete. And in this particular world, there are consequences to not training those things that go beyond, the win or a loss is weighted a lot differently.
A little differently.
Yeah. And, maybe that win or loss, we could take it to the morbid side of things. I don't want to do that.
No.
I just take it more to like, am I there in the moment, at the moment I need to be that guy or that person? Like, can I perform on demand? And if I'm not able to do that, what are my deficiencies?
Right.
And how do I overcome those? And that's what I've seen IEP doing. And it's a little bit of a tougher sell to the higher achiever, that's out there that there's fitter than most people on their their department or their team or in their gym or whatever else. It's hard to tell a person or identify for a person like, hey man, you're a monster. But how is this?
Right.
So how do you test that out and how do you kind of figure that out? Like, I think there's ways.
But that is how is by testing objectively. We have yet to have in the testing we've done a person that was physically at the very top and shooting at the very top. And so everyone,
just because when I tested, I stuck to the shooting. I had one of them in the car.
I'm pretty sure Sal still beat you in the 300-meter shuttle. No big deal, but no, I will say this too, and Aaron can maybe speak on it as well if he would like. But the highest performers, I have yet to have one that that's like, I'm good, bro. Like, they are generally the ones that are like, I dig this. Like, how do I take it to the next level and fine tune things, right? Especially when we get over the shooting side, right? Which is why we and I want to maybe not give a shout out, like the guys that have helped us build where we're at. Sal, Preston, Anthony,
right.
Josh, those guys.
They're both athletes and shooters.
Athletes, shooters that are the highest level professionals that I've met in law enforcement from any level of special operations units I've ever worked with. That I look back and I think of as Aaron and I were coming in with our expertise, being able to pick their brain, see like what are they doing? How can we help that? But then them giving us feedback of like, dude, that's not how we do it in our world, right? Of making sure there was kind of a litmus test of nerd or lab side to real life application, right? And I think that's where the when we started identifying those gaps and refining that process, comes back to objective testing. But I think it's an education thing, right? What can we give to anybody that comes to? We've never had someone be perfect. Even Hotshot over here. At that point, like
still you have to pass the cheat drill.
Yeah, still
always throwing rounds.
But no, like seriously, I think back to like the PT. We were like, gosh, damn. My brother played the NFL. I tell people the story all the time. My brother played the NFL. Like, I've seen professional athletes. I see this dude go in with everyone else, and I was like, holy crap. Like, this is a professional athlete at a
And then
level.
He gave me a gun and had me run. He was like, well, boys, it's been fun.
Dude, I think of it, but seriously though, I think back to that time, like you had trained shooting so much, which I really respected, because you had only been shooting like, what, a year, 2 years?
Maybe a year.
At that time. But the tactical games at that point, y'all were pretty static. But y'all were starting to have those, what do you call it, side matches?
Yeah, like aggregates. We moved a little bit, yep.
And to your credit, I appreciate. I remember there was one of the drills you're like, hey, bro, I just don't feel comfortable doing this. And I appreciate it.
Yeah, I was like, I don't feel comfortable with a loaded firearm.
Yeah,
when I
running.
Running.
Yeah.
And every time we were on the firing line, I cleared it before I left.
Yep,
I never felt comfortable with a hot fire in my
And so it was one of those things that like, but you came out and did it. And then after that, I was like, gosh, damn, we created a monster.
It seemed like every other time I saw a story, he's like running.
Just running and gunning. We're like, holy crap.
I don't show hits though. So it's whatever.
It's all he does all day long.
But no, it paid off. Once you got to nationals last year, you won the, was it 2-gun? Or
the aggregate.
One of the
aggregate. I did not win the 2-gun. I did win the aggregate.
Definitely not the
You did win the aggregate. And it was all
goals.
movement.
Hashtag goals.
But no, anyway, sorry to derail that. But all that to say is I think objectively testing is one of the things you have to do. One of the problems that I've seen though is if you don't know what the objective things to test, that's a major limiting factor.
I think this goes back to the approach of the IEP approach, is that like you've looked at the research, you've studied what other departments are doing, like the questions and the dialogue around what qualifications are and who's doing what and what standard are people being held to is an ongoing conversation out there. And I think at the end of the day, what's becoming a little bit more recognized is, number one, it's not the same anywhere.
Yeah.
Right. And most people can agree that minimum standard is pretty low. It's a very low bar set. And the other part of that conversation is that what I think a lot of folks are agreeing on is that if you just raise the bar a little bit, people, even the most mediocre people, their level will raise a little bit there, and that can continue. So if you could give them like an objective standard of sorts, like not this is what your department does, right? And this is what you have to do in order to be to be an officer or whatever else. But we're giving you kind of a new standard or something different to think about. And we're comparing you against your peers across the board, which is effectively what this survey did. Just like, okay, based on the 400 or whatever officers or SWAT officers that we've taken through both the testing and the survey, here's where you rank. Now, that is different than setting a standard, because you're letting the athletes tell you what the standard is in this case, and that way people can judge for themselves and decide where they want to take themselves to.
Right.
And again, this goes back to the higher achiever deciding, am I good enough, or is there room for improvement here? And that's what you've been making available to people. The interesting part about it is, for me, is like, this is what I walked away. This is over a year ago when I went to this thing. I was like, you got to get this information out to the masses, right? And so that's been happening a lot through the social media in a different way. And that's the thing, like everything's kind of gravitated to the performance shooting piece. Yeah. But this all was rooted in everything that's been talked about here and kind of it all coming together. I think it's super exciting because the sky's the limit on this. Yeah. And I think what we'll probably end up talking about later in through this and other mediums, which is what I'm super excited to do with you guys, is show people what those standards might look like, right? Kind of put it out there, go, we're not saying this is the end all be all, but this is what that standard might look like based on what we've studied, right? And what the athletes have told us and what we've seen and what they're continuing to tell us and what we're discovering and now observing at a different level, because we didn't know what we didn't know right back then. So you're putting that out there. Then it's like, hey, if you want to improve on these, and then we've identified, okay, here are the gaps based on this. Like, you may be missing a little bit of this, and maybe you need a little less of this over here. Maybe maybe chasing that 650-pound deadlift isn't so important, bro, because you can't keep it up for 5 minutes, kind of thing. So maybe you need a little bit more capacity, those kind of things. And then giving them a direction or a pathway on how to improve those deficiencies, no matter where they are in space and time, kind of in their own journey, career, or in pursuit of their goals, and giving them, here's some answers for you. And we're not going to sugarcoat this, and we're not going to get overly sciencey, but we're also not going to dumb this shit down. We're not going to dumb it down, because that's the problem. That's the problem. If you dumb it down, you try to make it too basic, it gives people too much wiggle room to go through and go, hey, this is fine. It should be better than fine, right? It should be good. And I think the people that are out there serving, this is kind of like what my draw to this is those people that give so much and are trying to balance all the things, and we're expecting to know all the things somehow, right? And to take care of themselves and all this stuff, and then show up and be that dude. Like, that's a lot to ask, and to not give them the support, and then also obviously some direction. That's rough for me.
Dude,
right?
that's a great, I actually hadn't articulated or built in my mind that way of, we're not dumbing it down. We're also not going super hard nerd at you, talking in a way that's, sciencey or nerdy, right? Yeah. That community deserves absolutely a higher level thinking, but approaching it in a way that anyone can understand. Yeah. And I think that's exactly actually how I feel about it. Great call.
I'm just like, hey, I don't want
not how I would have said it, but
I don't think you need to know everything. You don't need to be an expert in human physiology and anatomy and nutrition and all that stuff. I also understand you're not an idiot, and you probably want to be talked to like a mature professional. Yep. And if I'm wearing that badge, carrying that gun, doing whatever that I'm doing, like, I take that seriously. And I understand that, like, my fitness, my health, my performance, my ability to perform on demand is my responsibility, is super important. And like, if I had my hope is that if they find that they have a resource that understands them, understands how to talk to them, not that we do their job. Like, I'll never do that job. I'm never going to do that job. But on the human performance side of things, I've been around this. I've been around the block a few times. And I work with all ages, all types of athletes, and you know what? They're all human beings. At the end of the day, you just happen to do a little bit of a different job, and so therefore, we might suggest some things based on our knowledge and experience that help you out. And I think that's where this is where this is going. I don't know where you guys want to wrap up with that, but that's the thing that I'm most excited about with IEP right now.
Slow clap is what Hep was. No, man, I could not agree more. I think we are bringing the right team together of experts, from the four sitting here to the guys we've worked with already. I think we've grown a lot. And it's kind of like I was telling him, like, whenever he asked me for that 30-second, like, it's been a lot of trailblazing, but I think we are continuing to refine. And we're at a point now where we have a very good process.
I'm stoked to be here with you guys and just make that available to everybody. I'm looking forward to this, guys. Thanks.
This is going to be fun.
Yeah, it's going to be so fun.
A great time.
So fun. I appreciate you guys sitting down.